Hi, it's Lennie Moore, and I'm just going over the music design and what I created for Outcast: A New Beginning. And there's a couple of points I want to make in the course of this video. Just the scope of the modular system that was built. It's 136 minutes of layered plus procedural music. It's very modular, so layered meaning a vertical components as well as procedural horizontal components. And one of the main points that I did was in recording the score, we recorded the orchestra in sections. This is also due to COVID and not having the ability to record everybody all together, and ended up being fortuitous in us figuring out how to create as much adaptability with the music system by having the orchestra all separated. It was about 2 months of recording with the live musicians plus soloists and all that, so a lot of little components. One of the things that I was very adamant about as far as what I think makes great music in games is really avoiding repetition and trying to think of ways to avoid repetition. So I did it through a bunch of different kinds of techniques. On the procedural side, a lot of the music asset assignments for minutes of music were by sections or areas of an open world setting. So instead of having a 5-minute segment of a grassland area, I decided to break it into 3 pieces, an A, B, and a C piece. And if I show you what it looks like in Wise, so here's our grassland area. In the playlist for that area, I've got an A, B, and a C section. Each section is about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes long. And I set up in the composition of everything, I wrote it so that the beginnings and ends of every single segment would flow into the next segment. So that the A could go to B or C, B could go to A or C, etc. And then the playlist, I have a bunch of randomizers where it does a little transition to get into either the A, the B, or the C segment. And then after it does that, it'll start randomly playing one of the other segments. When it finishes this step, it then moves on to this random continuous step where it just rolls the dice and picks A, B, or C. I'm really playing with form. Each of the segments is similar material, but it's developed in different ways. A lot of leitmotif approach, and just to give you a little taste of what that sounds like. So transition into the A segment. If you happen to revisit the grassland area at another time, it'll just roll the dice again. Now we're picking a different segment. And you can see how it moves to another segment, right? And just sort of continues onwards. Let's see. So the other elements is, if I look in more detail at some of these, I added custom cues for the beginnings of phrases, musical phrases and stuff like that. So in my transition rules, I do have it set up where, let's see, we're going to go to, there it is. Okay, so my transition rules here. Okay, so I have specific transition rules. The transition rules are kind of, can be a little nutty, but let's just go. If I'm going from grassland to any, I go to the next custom cue. If I'm going from area to area. So it doesn't necessarily go to the beginning of a segment, it'll jump to the beginning of a phrase. If it's going back from like grassland to a village and then back to the grassland. So that's something that ends up being kind of a neat aspect of this system. The amount of rules are kind of crazy because there's just a ton of them. Let's see, the next thing I want to show. So as far as the layered kind of variation, got my separate orchestral elements. I recorded things, brass and percussion were recorded together. That's the orchestral percussion. I have percussion soloists that were done by several people, including M.B. Gordy, Mark Grisky, and Chris Garcia. And they did a bunch of remote recording and sent me all those tracks. So that's all separate and isolated. But I have my orchestral battery, timpani, and the battery together with the brass in the recordings. Let's see, also high strings separated by low strings. Those were different recording sessions. Woodwinds, piano and harp were recorded together. Choir was recorded separately. So I've got like 5 sets of stems just within the orchestral and choral elements that give me a lot of flexibility. But the other thing that's also fun, and these things are either randomized, as you can see here, where I've got the brass just 50-50 chance of playing or not playing on this particular segment. But I also have some things with real-time parameter controls, and there's a game situation. In this case, it's a explore tension kind of component, and depending on the value, will tell me whether or not this solo percussion kicks in. As an example, and then for melodies, I had my melody soloists do several variations of performance. So that creates a little more variety. So I have a Caval, which is a shepherd flute, and then Tina Guo had some cello melodies. And then you can see here there's a randomizer. She's got 4 different variations of melody, but I also have, for each little sub-track here. So the 4 out of 6 times, or 2/3 of the time, I'll hear a Tina melody, and then 1/3 of the time, there won't be a cello melody. It'll just be the orchestral elements. And that adds some even more variation on the vertical side. So there's a lot going on there. Other examples that are more vertical. So in the Galenta stuff, the playlist is a little different. So it is literally combinations where instead of using things like randomizers, I just decided to use the playlist. So each stem is a combination. So in this case, combo 1 is choir, woodwinds, piano, harp, low strings only. And then combo 2 is brass, percussion, celeste together, high strings and low strings together. Combo 3 is choir, woodwinds, and synths only. And then the full combo version is everything. And then the playlist, so we have a transition to go into it, and then there's the full version that plays the very first time, and then randomly after that it starts randomizing through the combos, and we'll do that randomized number of times, and then when it finishes going through that, it cycles back around and then plays the full version again. So that's another example of like ways I created a little more variation on the interactive side with some of these. Combat is another one. let's use fast creatures as an example. So there's sort of a combat intensity layer, which is right here. So that's a danger level kind of a game parameter. And I have different instruments. In this case, it's medium percussion at a particular danger level, as well as the solo percussion low, which is like the big taikos and things like that. Different values for different things. And then in the playlist, it does the similar thing like I did with the area exploration kinds of cues, where it randomly picks A, B, or C, and then it starts rolling dice after that. Here's an example of this one. And this one, I'll just set the danger level all the way up, and then I'll start moving it around. So let's try this. So it's the full version. Lighter versions, less percussion. Jumps into the next segment. So that's an example from the combat side. And the puzzle side, I also did similar things with combinations, like just strings of woodwind, strings of brass, and then a full version with the variable flute melodies. And so that kind of works in a slightly different kind of varied way. So let me just do an example from here. Etc. So you can kind of hear it a little different than the last time, the full version, where it's just strings and brass only. Throughout the entire score, there's all these kinds of variations. So trying different things, both horizontally, trying different things vertically, trying to keep it as interesting as possible for the player is definitely part of that. The other thing that I would also point out would be things like the transitions throughout. Because it's an open world game, you can kind of practically go from just about anywhere to anywhere else. Even my little transitions, which are these simple little they're one measure sort of swells that act as glue to everything. Even within the swells, you'll notice that there's variations within the swells. So, one example here is I've got like a vocoder synth, and I've got a couple of variations of that, and then I have another one that's attached to, a particular real-time parameter control. And then further down the list, I've got like a couple, a bunch of different synth components that are, each one is a slightly different variation. So there's like a synth quiet kind of thing and a synth beyond kind of patch and things like that. So there's like multiple things going on here with the synths. And then if I just hit play, so that would be one example. If I hit it again, some subtle differences between different things, sometimes different registers, different octaves. So every time even a single transition is happening, it's going to be different every time. So that's one of the nice things about just coming up with these different kinds of elements. Another thing I'll point out in the transition rules is that, within each of these different sets of rules, there may be different sort of fade out, fade in times, different kinds of things. Some things are on the next bar, some things are on the next beat, as far as how fast things move. If we're going from area to combat, it's on the next beat, but village to area, it's on the next bar. If I'm going from combat back to a particular area kind of transition, it's on the next bar it's going, but it goes to more random cues after combat, which I think makes it kind of interesting. So you're not hearing the beginning of the same one or two pieces of music every time. And there's also different settings for the kinds of timings of fade ins, fade outs, depending on the context of whether it's more ambient sounding or combat situation, that kind of a thing. That's one aspect of the transition rules that I think is interesting. And then also going back to the modular system, one of the things I did differently on this project when it came to cutscenes, what I did was I would look at the scene inside my DAW in Cubase, and then I would sort of map out what I needed from different cues that were pre-existing within the game mechanics, and then I would edit together a cue that would basically work fine for individual cutscenes. So you can see sort of the edit points and the crossfades. If I just need a little tail at the end of something, I would kind of create it all non-destructively here. If I needed little transitional elements to kind of move from one section to another, I would do all that here within the tool. And, I found that worked pretty well as far as, getting something to sound like it worked well dramatically. And a lot of times because it's modular, if I just need something very simple and light, like just high strings in a particular moment from a particular cue for a dramatic cutscene, then that's all I need. That's all I need to kind of cut in. I don't have to deal with full cues or anything like that. And so that worked reasonably well. Took a bit to figure out. And I had checked in with some of my colleagues to see if anybody else was kind of trying this method, and some people had talked about it, but I thought I would give it a shot. And the benefit of this kind of a system, it's a little more complicated to pull off, but it basically means that you're not adding extra download. The bulk of the download when people are downloading the patches for the game or anything like that, it's just all the original game materials, and it's just the tiny little files that are the session files within Wise that allow us to kind of create these segments and create non-destructive edits. So that part of it was like a very cool kind of thing. And then let's look at something a little more complicated. It's probably 108. Yeah, so this one is probably one of the more complicated ones, where there's like a full mix of something, then transitional elements, and then it goes on to another section right over here with some more edits, and then it kind of continues on. So, and it sounds perfectly fine. As for the final example, I'll just show you a little bit of gameplay footage, and you can kind of see how things are working in the game itself and how everything works pretty well and pretty efficiently. So thanks for listening, and enjoy the game footage.
This is definitely not business as usual. Liaz. Liaz!
You? But I saw you revert in the explosion.
Well, I'm back. Don't ask me how it works. I'm afraid your guardian friend wasn't so lucky. She took out a lot of invaders before I could get to her.
Her sacrifice makes us proud. Bless her essence. And bless the Ulukai. The trial is a success. You have proven that you are protected by the Yods.
Why are we stopping here? I need a portal to my dimension. I got a daughter, and...
I also have a daughter, and I don't want her to suffer. The Yods need you to deal with the monsters that are oppressing the Talans.
Listen, I gotta tell you something about these monsters you're up against.
I know all about them. They're more poisonous than the Nekar plague. We should exterminate them all.
Oh, come on. That's a bit excessive. There must be some good people among them.
None deserve mercy. Not after what they did to my people. But forgive my anger, Ulukai. You wanted to tell me something.
Memory blanked again. Yes, home. How can I get back to my dimension?
Only the Almayel can answer that question. But Kizar is a forbidden island.
Oh, my kind of place. Which way?
The island is covered by a massive Helidium shield. We call it the Spear. Nothing can penetrate it. So is the will of the Yods.
Your Yods couldn't make this easy for me, huh?
Maybe there is a way. The children of Kizar are suffering from a mysterious disease, and the Almayel is calling Shamazes to heal them.
Do I look like one of these Shamazes?
No. However, you could convince one to introduce you to the Almayel. But they're going to make you work for it.
Well, how about you introduce me? I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of thing.
I won't scratch you, Ulukai. Besides, Dolotai Guardians are not welcome in Kizar anymore.
So, where do I start?
Emiya is the closest village. Ask for Shamaz Nemet.
Gotcha. Oh, you should wear this device so we can keep in touch.
Comlink synchronizing. Synchronization complete.
But what about the invaders?
You leave these unidentified monsters to me. cool. Here's Mia. Let's find Shamaz Nemet. Maybe I could use my scanner to look for Nemet.